This still is the AM show. My name is Benjamin Akakpo. Thank you for staying with us on this network. Now, we kick off the conversation. Our first big story is going to focus on the economy, the IMF deal, the Bretton Woods institutions, where we are not, but also, are we going to have a second round of a domestic debt exchange program? Now, a few days ago, we heard from Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta, and that was what we gleaned from the situation. However, there has been a sharp rebuttal from that same ministry. We'll be giving you the breakdown of everything that has transpired between then and now. In fact, according to the finance ministry, there has been some misunderstanding. But what was said versus what has been related to you, was there a disconnect? We get into those issues as we host our guests. So joining us, first of all, Michael Yamson. He is a partner, Ishmael Yamson and Associates. He joins the conversation. A very good morning to you, Mike.
Good morning to you and to all the listeners.
Great. I heard you speak over the weekend, and that's where I'm going to situate the conversation from. You were talking about the fact that as far as the spring meeting of the IMF is concerned, we don't seem to have a game plan, and that we're missing out. You say that is problematic, and you're cautioning government on a number of matters. But let's start with this game plan, even before we get into the main thrust of the matter. Why is it, effectively, that you feel we don't have a game plan for a country that is seeking a bailout, for a country that has gone to the IMF, for a country that has completed the staff level agreement, for a country which is now claiming it has fulfilled all the requirements, of course, apart from the bit to do with external creditors? It is interesting that you say we go to the platform without a game plan. How do you substantiate this claim?
Very simply, and I will say this. The issue is not simply about debt. This government has still, in the 2023 budget proposals, planned to increase spending on certain line items in the budget that, in the grand scheme of what is happening now, begs belief. But the most critical item for any economic management team is the growth of the economy. And the growth of this economy is founded on small businesses and medium-sized businesses. Our plan going into the IMF discussion, I don't see anywhere, and on Saturday, I had that short discussion with Ladi. There is nowhere a plan for the growth of small businesses and medium-sized businesses. So yes, we will find ways to extract value from Ghana to settle our debt obligations. But there is no plan, pardon me, there is no plan to find money for small businesses or to indeed change the policy space to favor small businesses in Ghana or the private sector writ large. So we don't have a game plan. We have a plan that depends on increasing taxation. We have a plan that relies on regressive taxation. We have a plan that is skewed to deepen the tax net, not broaden the tax net. Those are not recipes for success, because indeed those have been the ingredients of all our recovery plans that have taken us back to the IMF for the 17th, or as someone even added the other day, if you add structural adjustment program, the 18th and possibly even the 19th time. So the ingredients of our plan for recovery have not changed. And that means we have no plan, because those ingredients have taken us back 17, 18 times. That is what I stand on to say. This will not help. Um, if anyone should ask Ghana today that where will the surpluses in the productive sector come from to feed the tax, I think they will be silent because there is
In other words,
nothing.
you think we'll be silent or they will be silent because we don't have the answer to those questions?
I think government will be silent because if government had a plan, it would have been part of a comprehensive proposal. That is not there. That is not there. It's not in government's comprehensive proposal that it took to Washington. It's not in any of the conversations that it is having with interested parties in Ghana. Um, it is quite simply just astounding that we are where we are, and all that we are talking about, as you opened with, is asking pensioners to come back for another discussion about how to slash their benefits. And remember, like I said, we're talking about savings. It's a very technical term, but really what we are saying is we will take household incomes away from Ghanaians. If we take away household incomes, how do we expect to power back our economy? These are very real matters, and I think we have just allowed ourselves to be so consumed by some conversation about somebody sitting somewhere in Washington wanting to help Ghana with its debt exchange. And so we've just gone there, and the terms they give are the terms we take. But we seem to have no terms for ourselves, no minimum red line that we must protect incomes. So I think we're in.
But all along, let's remind ourselves, this administration, through the president, said that they did not know how to bring back human life, or in fact, people who had died, but they knew how to resuscitate the economy. That was said. Then again, mention has been made throughout this process of attempting to secure an IMF program, that we're going to do it in such a way that we don't end up making the system chaotic, collapsing businesses and all of that. Are you saying that all of this has been mere rhetoric and that we have nothing, policy, planning on paper to substantiate that claim? You talk about small businesses, and there has been talk about that in government circles as well. So I'm just trying to get the thrust of what you're saying. Is it to say that maybe the rhetoric is there, but the action isn't there?
Shall I put it this way? If you own a small business, your utility costs have gone up since the last budget was read. Water, electricity, they've gone up. Fuel prices are rising again. They went down really due to external factors. They are rising again. A month ago, the dollar, people were proudly exclaiming that the dollar couldn't even fetch 10 cedis. Today, the dollar is over 12 and a half cedis. What happened in 1 month, and what is the economic management or planning or fiscal, yeah, that's fiscal, monetary planning that is causing the CD effectively to just yo-yo. I don't believe there is a plan beyond the talk. I think that when external things happen, we latch onto them. We make a lot of noise over something that has absolutely nothing to do with our own planning or our own doing. And then when that goes away, we look for the next magic bullet. I think we have a government searching for magic bullets, and every day it's a new thing, and it's not going to help. So, government needs to take a step back. Government needs to sit with all the stakeholders. It may be a chaotic process, but it will certainly be a more respectful, more involving, a more inclusive conversation where all the parties can work out the best middle ground for Ghana. A middle ground that inspires confidence. Right now, there is zero confidence. If people are running from the cedi to the dollar, it means they have no confidence in the economy that the cedi serves. That is a clear signal as any. So there is no confidence in the Ghanaian economy. That's why people will run to the dollar. If your joy of economic recovery is three tax bills, then you don't understand the drivers of growth. Because the drivers of growth have nothing to do with taxation. They have to do with investment. They have to do with innovation. They have to do with supporting people with skills. They have to do with preserving markets for small businesses. None of these things seem to be uppermost in the mind of the government. It's only extract, extract, extract taxes. That is not an economy. That is slavery. So I'm very sorry that I have to say it bluntly. I think the government has lost its way. I think the government is now utterly beholden to the interests that lie outside of Ghana, whether for political or economic reasons. Some help is being extended to us. But let's be clear, it's not the sort of help that makes us build a resilient economy. It is the same knee-jerk, let's run to drop a check on Ghana's lap. And government will accept it because for a few weeks or a few months, it will create a magic illusion that Ghana is all right. Ghana is not all right. Ghana is not all right unless the conversation is about growth. And our conversation right now, you will admit, is all about debt.
Interesting times where we find ourselves currently. You say government has lost its way in managing the situation. In other words, as far as those businesses are concerned, small businesses who by and large hold the economy are concerned, we're not doing right by them. You've spoken about taxes and the rest, which also makes me think that you agree with Sir Dr. Sam Jonah, who said that we had to give a human face to this entire domestic debt exchange program, the IMF, facilitating the process locally to ensure that we don't cause the economy to crumble. But I would ask you this. The government has been saying that it is not conducting another round of a domestic debt exchange. That is the premise for our conversation. In the last few days, we've been speaking about what the finance minister said. But this is what we're being told today. In fact, it's captured in the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Now, during a virtual engagement with the country's external creditors, speaking on the macroeconomic update on the economy on Thursday from Washington, D.C., the finance minister assured that government had not planned to carry out any second round of DDE program on pension funds. And that has been the bone of contention. His assurance was in reaction to media reports that the Ministry of Finance had assured Eurobond investors of another round of DDEP. And he calls it a misunderstanding, quote. We're not planning a second round of the DDEP with pension funds. I think it was a misunderstanding, the finance minister said. But when you followed these discussions, I'm sure you've been following the spring meetings. Is that the same vibe, the same understanding you got? He says it's a misunderstanding. Is that the same understanding you got when you listened to Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta? Do you think there's a missing piece of the puzzle somewhere, especially as we've also seen those letters from the Finance Ministry talking about pension funds and also from the pensioner bondholders saying that they expect their returns on their coupons and all of that? How do you piece all of this together?
Well, let me put it this way. Clarity is lost because if the government was very clear, again, about what it intended to do, this miscommunication was never going to happen. Somebody raised a conversation somewhere about pension bondholders after a policy decision had been made months, a few weeks, or shall I say a couple of months ago, that pension bondholders will be excluded. So why did pension bondholders come up again? This is a matter that domestically we have discussed, concluded, and sealed. There was no need. And it is this same issue of not having a clear game plan that I refer to. A matter that is closed should not come up and warrant a flurry of letters rejecting a purported statement, a purported understanding, another one saying I need to clarify, and a whole host of unhelpful exchanges going on. That's government's fault because it is government that calls the meetings. It is currently government that made promises domestically that it cannot keep and ends up breaking and rescheduling payment date upon payment date upon payment date. At the same time, it is continuing to spend, you know, unhinged on other things that, if you ask any reasonable person now, we should really rather have been seeking to bring under control. And so I would candidly say that politics is still driving the economics, but the the right way around is that very clear economics must drive the politics. But unfortunately, pride, prejudice, arrogance, incompetence, I don't know what word to give to it now because it seems that we are dead set on a certain course. We know that this course leads to uncontrollable costs and obligations that we cannot finance. And yet we will not pull the brakes. The other is about focusing on what you do well, actually doing it well, doing it with political consensus, doing it with broad consensus amongst all the key economic players. That part, which is called growth, we have abandoned. And we are allowing it to happen, in a very I don't care-ish manner. If it happens, it happens. But our focus right now, get debt reserve certain programs, many of which are just driven by politics, not driven by any clear economic logic. Um, there's such a thing as cutting your losses. When you, when you run an economy, you have to understand when to cut your losses. We seem wedded to our losses. And we think other people will keep coming to pay because we are a golden boy or a showcase. I tell you, they also have their priorities. The 3 billion is not the most expensive bailout in the world. It has taken this long because there is no confidence in our plan.
Wait, you're
And
saying, I know that there are countries that have sought over $40 billion. I get that. But you're saying that even for the pittance we're getting, the 3 billion, it's taken so long because we've not got things right. That's what you're saying.
That's the bottom line. Look, it's taking so long because no one has trust in what we are saying. Everybody is trying to help us to put a credible picture up so that they can say, okay, you are good enough for help. The truth is that if we went on our own legs, if we went on our own case, if we went on the strength of our own convictions, we would be thrown out of that chamber in under 5 minutes.
But if it were that bad, why would the IMF boss, for example, be clamoring for support for Ghana? If the situation was that bad, why would they even be willing to help us?
Ghana is their showcase. Ghana is their showcase, and they don't want Ghana to fail. That is the bottom line. We are living on the simple fact that they made Ghana their showcase and they don't want Ghana to fail. Other than that, I tell you, any responsible economist looking at Ghana today, looking at Ghana government's plan, they will laugh you out of the room. They will laugh you out of the room. So let's be frank. We are simply lucky that the West and the IMF cares. But it is not because of anything we are doing right. Because they knew our debt position 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and today. They knew. They watched us mess up, and they want to help us. But they are not helping us because we are worthy of help. They are helping us because they don't want their own institutions to suffer a credibility. So they will help us. But we have to also then be alive to the fact that we cannot keep living on the good graces of other people forever. 20 years ago, Indonesia was nowhere. They are now the 5th largest economy in the world. India was nowhere. They are now the 4th largest economy in the world. When you put your mind to it, a country is able to do great things. Unfortunately, we put our minds to the politics and we forget the economics. We put our mind to the short term, we forget the long term. We put our mind on spending, we forget about growth. We cannot go on like this. Whoever is in government, I think that we must hold what growth, what we ability. What we don't need, what we don't want is politics of behavior. It is not anywhere. We are here because of politics. We are struggling to make headway over simple 3 billion because the politics is wrong and there's no consensus internally.
Okay.
And nobody gives you money when your house is on fire.
Let me just sneak in these bits as we wrap with you. We're giving chunks of the conversation to different people. We'll also be hosting the convener for the bondholders, Dr. Edu Anani. But just before I let go of you, very briefly and straight to the point, I have 3 questions that fuse into each other. One, how expectant are you that we're going to get a program by June, as has been purported? Now we're told it's been accelerated. Then, will this entire IMF deal, when we secure it, do you think, be more painful than we currently imagine? And finally, just to sneak in, the Secretary General of the AFTA has said recently that we don't need all of these programs from the Bretton Woods institutions. We need to boost intra-Africa trade, and that is the way to go. What do you think? It's basically 2 questions, but one on the end of the IMF and the other one in terms of intra-Africa trade. Your quick thoughts on that, sir?
Look, let me start with wisdom. Wisdom is what has been said from the AFCFTA. We need to boost intra-African trade. Second, will it be painful? I bet you it's going to be more painful. Will it happen in June? Some may hope it happens in June. Me personally, if you ask me, I wish it never happens. Because the answers are here. Government sat with independent bondholders and agreed 83.5 billion of savings from corruption, known corruption, waste, revenue leakages, and loopholes. We have abandoned working on that and being concrete about the progress on that. And we are chasing 30 or 31 billion in Washington. What is wrong with us? Why are we so desperate and so willing to put aside what we can do for ourselves and go and place ourselves at the mercy of others? It just blows my mind. So let's give credit to AFTA. That's wisdom spoken. Boost our own trade. Pain, yes. June, maybe. But it doesn't excite me one tiny little bit. It's a waste of time.
Mr. Yamson, we're grateful for your time. It's a waste of time, the entire IMF deal, he says. And he says there's going to be a lot more pain than we currently imagine. Michael Yamson is a partner at Ishmael Yamson and Associates. He shared his thoughts with us there. Let's now hear from the convener of the bondholders, pensioner bondholders to be specific, Dr. Edu Anani Entry. Now, in recent times, we've seen some exchanges between the finance ministry and them. They have come out to categorically call out the finance ministry per a release from there dated a few days ago, I believe the 14th or so, which speaks about the fact that some agreement had been arrived at for the 28th day of April. They countered that, but they say they're going to wait for their funds, and if by the 28th they do not get the receipts on their coupons, they are going to start picketing again at the Ministry of Finance. We're joined by Dr. Edu Anani Entry. A very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm very well. Even before we get into the pensioner bondholder situation, the IMF deal seems to encapsulate all of what we're experiencing. From what you followed so far, what do you make of progress towards securing an IMF deal, and how optimistic are you?
Well, I think that we are making progress, but rather slowly. And it's because of the way we started this whole DDEP. If the consultation and negotiations have started earlier, we would have gone past where we are now. That's my comment.
Now, there has been talk about your group picketing, and we shall talk about whether there's going to be a second round of DDP or not, because the finance ministry says there's been some sort of misunderstanding. But in terms of your coupons, the payments that are outstanding, in recent times, there was a communique from the Ministry of Finance. Then you came out with a rebuttal. Just tell us what exactly has been happening. We know that the period for payment on these coupons has elapsed. I mean, it's been pushed back time and again. But what is the latest development, and where does the misunderstanding really lie?
Well, thank you. I think everybody knows the delays that we have to stay with, as it were. Things have delayed. We have been writing letters to government. We have been making press releases about the delays. And then when government, initially because of the problems, reconciliation of figures in the depository, we all understood that let's give government some time. So after the program has ended, 21st was the settlement day. After settlement date, the dictates of the market is that just after settlement, you should be able to pay people that has not tendered in, because now you have known them. That didn't happen on the 21st, 22nd, 27th. We went to the ministry. They issued a statement that they will start paying on the 13th. On the 13th, the payment didn't come. We issued a statement again on the 14th complaining about the delay. The ministry came out to say they will pay, but we're going to pay only two, the 6th and the 13th February one. And then the rest will be announced later. We didn't hear anything, kept on complaining. Then the ministry came to say that we're now going to pay that were due on the 20th of February. The 20th of February one was only in respect of the coupons. One was a coupon payment, and one was the other one was coupon plus the principal that has matured. They announced that they will pay only the coupons, and then they will come again and tell us where they will do the rest. We waited. By 30th, we haven't heard anything. So we wrote a letter to the ministry and said, we don't like what is happening, and the ministry must work to put an end to these delays. And then we gave the ministry up to 21st of March, of April.
April, right.
So all the arrears, both principals and coupons. And that if we don't receive those payments by 21st, we would resume our picketing. We didn't hear anything from the government, from the ministry, response to the 30th letter. Meanwhile, the 30th letter, we have copied the Speaker of Parliament. We didn't hear anything until Friday, just this past Friday, last Friday. that we got messages that we should attend a meeting at short notice. However, we endeavor to attend. Two of us, myself and another lady of the group, we joined the meeting by Zoom. At the meeting, I believe what the government wanted to do, or what the ministry wanted to do, was to just get this joint committee, which was set up some time ago, technical committee, to meet and be given 4 weeks to plan, agree on a pathway towards the payment of these arrears. They will say, no, this is not a time for a committee to meet and agree on any pathway. You are the debtor. Find your way of paying your creditors. It's not the creditors coming to sit down with you and agree on a pathway. So that proposal was not accepted. Then I came out that, well, we have written to you, giving you 21st as a deadline. I believe I can convince my group to accept a 1 week window, put another week on it, so that the deadline is now shifted to 28. That I believe I can do. But I even told the meeting that they should wait. The minister, which was the deputy minister chairing, should wait for me to just do a consultation with the forum. I believe I can get it, but I'll have to confirm from them, come back and confirm to the ministry that we have agreed to give a further 1 week. And if I give the confirmation, the ministry should respond to our letter of 30th March and say, after further engagement, the ministry or the government has agreed to pay all these arrears by 28. That is exactly the statement I made to the deputy minister, who said, yes, they will do that. After I have just consulted
So you're
with the
referring
forum,
to Abena?
yes.
Right.
After I consulted with the forum, I sent the test. First, I said I was going to write back if they accept, but I said, look, these days there are a faster way of communicating. So I said I will not do the writing. I will send it by text message. So after consultation, briefly, I sent back text message, and that was 4:25. Text message. I put the text of the text message in our press release, indicating that 1 week has been accepted, and that they should inform the deputy minister, and that now the deadline has been shifted to 28th of this month for all the payments of both outstanding principals and coupons to be made.
Right.
We should let the minister know of this. Then, because I have also requested that the ministry responds to our letter indicating the further engagement that have been made and accepting that the 28th April, the ministry was going to handle that because we are giving up to that. We were rather expecting to see a letter from the ministry. But before we could say, Jack, there was a press release that we have agreed for a technical committee to reconvene and work towards agreeing on the pathway for the payment of these coupons. And that 28 was stated, but the 28, according to if the 28 was the time frame within which they should meet and agree on the pathway. So when I saw this news release, I said, why is this thing happening? So I first called the other people who had a meeting, that is the individual coalition of individuals, those who are not pensioners. I said, well, did you agree on something like this after we have ended the meeting? Because I was on Zoom. They said, no, there was no such discussion after the meeting. And I said, well, we are going to respond to a press release. And that is why we brought this press release and stated that that was not the position taken. It was a proposal from the ministry, but it was not accepted. What we did was to give a further 1 week to government, so that now we have shifted our deadline from 21st to 28th.
Okay, so that clarifies matters for us.
Yes,
Just very
yes.
quickly, do you see another domestic debt exchange program in the offing? Do you see that shadow being cast upon you? While you are even pursuing your funds, there was some talk at the spring meeting of the IMF that suggested that the finance ministry says it was a misunderstanding. But from what you have seen, what you have heard, what you know, how do you feel about any such development? Because from that rhetoric, we were hearing that maybe pension funds could be involved. But now the talk is that no, it was a misunderstanding. How do you understand that?
Well, let me first let people see the clarification. If they say pension funds, they are not referring to us. Pension funds are the funds that are yet to be paid to people who will be coming on pensions, that are being invested on the behalf of these people who are yet to
Dr.
retire.
Eduentry, I do realize
Yes.
that you are bondholders and that these are
Yes.
pension funds, but you are a pensioner as well. I'm just asking that
Yes.
question in the general
Yes.
sense.
But I'm saying that the news is related to the pension funds, not pensioner bondholders. The pension funds are separate. That's a separate thing. The funds that are still being managed by pension fund administrators, fund management, they were exempted. And when they were exempted, they had an agreement. They call it the MOU. And the MOU, if you look at the MOU, the second point of their agreement was that, and I have it here, that the government of Ghana and organized labor shall, however, work together to explore mutually beneficial options within the debt sustainability level, and to also promote macroeconomic stability and economic recovery in the spirit of social partnership. So I believe it is this clause, this understanding that the government had with the pension funds, which were represented by the organized labor, that they will continue to cooperate and find some beneficial options within the debt sustainability limits. So I believe this is what the ministry is using to now tell them that when we agree that we may have to do certain things within these debt sustainability levels. So this is what I'm coming out with for us to discuss and accept and go for it. So that is for the pension funds, not pensioner bondholders.
Well, thank you very much. Any add-ons as far as securing your funds are or is concerned? Any maybe rhetoric?
Yes, we have today, we have this morning received an invitation letter from the ministry to come for a meeting at 1:00 to discuss.
So another one on short notice, right?
Another meeting at 1:00, and I believe it is to resolve, maybe for them to say, well, what we conveyed was not the right issue that should have, or the right statement that was made. I believe they will take the opportunity to do that, and we'll see what they are going to come out with in terms of how they are going to handle the payments of this that we have given.
So for now, you're still sticking to your 28th April deadline.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Dr. Anani Entry, we're grateful that you took the time to join us this morning for this conversation, and we wish you the very best. Dr. Edu Anani Entry is convener for the pensioner bondholders. He joined us there for a conversation. Let's now bring in Professor Lord Mensah. He is with the University of Ghana Business School, a senior lecturer. Thank you, Prof, for making the time to join us this morning.
Yeah, good morning. And if you can hear me loud.
I can hear you loud and clear. And thank you for the patience hanging in the wings. Now, quite a lot to talk about from this purported involvement of pension funds. And I think Dr. Edu Anani tried to create the separation between the two. Of course, with the pension funds, they were exempted last year. But the question is, it has come to the fore again on the back of some rhetoric from Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta. He has stated that it was a misunderstanding. Is it even possible, Prof, for them to be roped in the future? Even while this talk of another DDEP has been debunked by the finance ministry, is it even a possibility, contractually speaking? That's why I want to start off the conversation with you.
Yeah, yes, once again, good morning to our viewers. But then let me put it out there that every bond or every, financial agreement has terms. And in times of difficulty, the terms are normally compromised. But, it shouldn't be compromised from one end. If you look at what is happening now, it's an offer that the government is trying to place on the table. So it would take the counterparty, i.e., the bondholders, which the pension funds managers are part of it, to agree or not. So it is an offer on the table. It's not something that by force they should be robbing. But then let's also appreciate, the managerial failure of setting up targets as far as this country is concerned. The finance minister in the first restructuring agreed that, or put it out there, that we're going to have, if he's able to restructure 80% of the debt that the country owes domestically, we should be fine, and IMF should be satisfied with that. An announcement was made, and we know very well, the uncertainties that was on this country when we were going through the debt restructuring. The investor community was not sleeping. Individuals in our houses were not sleeping. And trust me, we cannot continue to keep the country in such an uncertainty. You've done a debt restructuring, and I've not seen any debt restructuring that an attempt is made. We get it done, and then we want to go back to it again. It doesn't make sense anywhere. Because when you do that, the investor community...
Yes, I get the point you're making, investor confidence and all that, but you also made the point. Critical times call for critical measures. Dire moments call for dire measures. If it were to get to that point where we had to do even more, we don't appear to have got there yet, but if it got to that point where realistically we had to do something extra, would you say it was totally out of the question?
I don't think we've gotten to any point where we are there in need of a new debt restructuring.
I'm saying hypothetically, if we did, would it be completely out of the question?
It will be out of the question completely, because it doesn't make economic sense to keep on with uncertainties every now and then.
Right.
Because what is happening now, we are done with debt restructuring in this country. The economies have started, picking up. Investors have started putting more money into, treasury bills, which gradually you win their heart to long-term instruments. So why do you want to go into debt restructuring again to cow the investor back to their shelves? For me, it does not make sense. And I believe that it was the target that was set. Probably the target wasn't enough. Or if not, probably the finance minister wants to free up more money. Because remember, when you do a debt restructuring, it eases up a space for you on your balance sheet, i.e. on your budget. So interest payment goes down. Now, if interest payment goes down, the funds that have been freed up to pay for interest, where would they go? That's the question we need to ask. So I think it's not needed now. Now that the system has started picking up and, people have started, getting confidence gradually into government instruments.
Now, just to quote what the finance minister has been saying on the back of this specific development, he says, I think it was a misunderstanding on the back of what I've just shared with you. And he goes on to talk about the MOU signed with organized labor associations on December the 22nd, 2022. Pension funds were exempted from the DDEP, and that had not changed. And quoting him again,
and
he says,
it stays as such.
Yes. Therefore, it is not correct to state that there will be a second round of DDEP with pension funds. Yeah. What we are doing is working with them, and this is why I want you to pay close attention to, working with them on how they can further help government to reduce the debt servicing and ensure we maintain sort of the debt sustainability in the MOU agreement. And so such discussions are continuing. when he talks about working with them to help government reduce the debt servicing and ensure we're able to maintain sort of sustainability levels, how do you understand that? What does it mean
Yeah,
to you?
I mean, it's a language, more or less, more put it in a soft side that um, the pensions fund holders, more or less being Ghanaians, they should help government one way or the other to come for, further debt restructuring. I mean, the softwares around it won't change anything. Whatever the case may be, it's about calling the pension fund managers and then agreeing with them that possibly things are difficult and we are struggling to meet certain financial obligations. So if you fall into the debt restructuring by reducing your interest rate and extending your maturities for us, it will free up space for government to turn up to other obligations. But that is an offer. I mean, it behoves on the fund managers to decide to whether they want to take it or not. Bonds are parties, and parties involved must ensure that they come to terms with whatever government is putting on the table. So, from where I sit, is an offer on the table, and managers will have to, pension managers will have to decide whether they will accept it or not.
Just to move the conversation forward and maybe get ready to wrap, I was just interacting earlier with Michael Yamson, an associate partner at Ishmael Yamson and Associates, and he made mention of a few rather important points. He made mention of the fact that this government had no game plan, and it was showing at the spring meetings. He spoke about small businesses and how the impact of the domestic debt exchange, among other things, the inflationary rates, the exchange rate, were compounding the woes of small business. That is one point he made. He also spoke about the fact that for him, honestly, he wished we didn't get an IMF deal, and that we should look like the Secretary General of the AFTA has said, at intra-Africa trade. That is the way forward. That is the way to go. He says practically saying we don't need this deal. He was also skeptical about the June deadline. What do you make about the real relevance of this IMF deal? I mean, Prof, pretend we didn't have the IMF. Would Ghana's economy come to a standstill? Would it crumble? I'd like your thoughts on these.
Right. That is a very big question to ask. We may have to appreciate that for every economic decision you make, there are alternatives. Now, let's look at it. If we were not to go to IMF, what would the country achieve, going forward? We needed financial discipline. And over the years, the country has exhibited that we cannot be self-disciplined when it comes to our financial management. The IMF deal, we have two benefits that we're looking at. We have to look at the hard benefit, which is the money that they will give us, looking at 3 billion spread over whatever number of years they will come to terms with. And then the soft side is the conditions that they give us. Even if you are going to ensure that small businesses thrive, you are going to ensure that inflation comes down, you're going to ensure that interest rates, comes down for the private man to easily borrow from the banks and all those, you need financial discipline. And we don't have that kind of self-guts or political will, let me emphasize on that, to be financially disciplined as a country. So engaging the IMF over the years has taught us a lesson. And the lesson has been that when we go to them and they give us conditions, the conditions are able to bring down, inflation rate, bring down interest rate, bring down whatever, economic indicator we are looking at, so that the economies will pick up for small businesses to thrive. But as we speak now, we need the IMF desperately. And we need the IMF, to reform or to restructure, the economy in general to ensure that things pick up for businesses so that going forward, we can concentrate on this intra-African trade that we're talking about. And remember, economies go through dynamics. Sometimes you might need debt, to put up some infrastructure for the small businesses. If you're talking about small businesses, you have your business somewhere in a hinterland somewhere, and you don't have good roads to drive on, it becomes a problem. And we live in a country where the horizons of the investor community has always been short term. You will see a young man. I normally do a test, kind of a survey in my class every time I get new students. And you see young ones targeting treasury bills. So you ask yourself, where would government be getting money to, go into long-term projects like roads and all those? Those will come with long-term debt, and you can only get long-term debt, externally. And so for that one, we had no choice about that than to look elsewhere for the long-term financing. But like I always say, we've missed the opportunity of borrowing to grow our economy. Ghana, let me put it that way, because we borrowed to a point where we got to know that the borrowing was not building up into revenue generation. The borrowing was not matching up with the infrastructure that is required by escalating population growth that we have. So we should have halted the borrowing and then do a stock count of where the investment has been. Once that has not been finished, we go and finish them, ensure that they are active. And I can tell you, if you do a stock count of, most of the projects going on in the country, it will tell you where our, monies are in terms of the debt that we've borrowed. So for me, we needed this financing, but trust me, the intra-African trade will be aftermath of what, aftermath of what we are going through when the economy has picked up, under the IMF deal, and then interest rates have come down, funds accessibility are easy. Government has learned some lesson to stop borrowing or possibly reduce the borrowing. Then in that case, we can have, that kind of intra-African trade. And that will give us that kind of an advantage, because if you go and sign, intra-African trade agreements and you don't have industries to feed into it, you will be more or less at the receiving end. You can host the headquarters, but you will not be making any impact or getting any benefit out of it. So for me, I think we need the IMF. The timing is now. And I'm not looking at the 3 billion. If you look at just the hard, benefit, which is the 3 billion, you will say that it won't do anything for the economy, because that's not even matching up with our, budget deficit in 2023. So we are looking at a soft benefit. Let me put it that way.
Thank you very much, Professor Lord Mensah, for joining us for this conversation. And so we've had on this conversation Professor Lord Mensah. He's a lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School. Before that, we had joining the conversation as well Dr. Edu Anani Entry. He is convener for the pensioner bondholders. And even before him, Michael Yamson, who is partner Ishmael Yamson and Associates. They've shared their thoughts, and poignantly that shared by Mr. Yamson, to the effect that for him, we probably don't even need an IMF deal. But here we are at the doorstep of the IMF. We'll see how things pan out with that June deadline firmly in place. Well, do stay with us. This is the first leg of the conversation, but still to come, we have that conversation about the Ghana Senior High School in Tamale, where, according to that viral video that has been out there, a lot of you have seen it, some of our brothers and sisters, some of our brothers, so to speak, have been seen in washrooms, turning them into cubicles or dormitories. That conversation will be coming your way at some point on the AM show. We have a lot more in that regard, which will be coming your way. But